Hello all, I thought it would be a good idea for us to go ahead and create another video, but a little bit more lengthier video to walk through the week and to provide additional content as we go through these samples. Just as a reminder, this Python Level 1 handbook is in your references in your classwork, and we will be going off of this moving forward. So let's jump down to week 7 on functions. This is where we are currently at. So week 7 functions, let's just walk through this. So exactly what is a function? A function is nothing more than just a block of code that is only ran when called, and you can pass parameters through it. And we've seen functions in the earlier weeks already. One of them being the type function, where we can say type, parentheses, and we can put a variable in here and it will spit back out what type of variable it is, whether that is an integer, a float, a string, etc. So we've already played with a couple of functions to get you used to it, but we're going to go into a little more detail this week. So there are typically 4 types of functions, and we will use the first 2 types within this course. So the first one is the user-defined function. So this is the programmer you can create. And this is what I'm going to have you do this week for your assignment, is create a function. And the allowability of this is for you to do a function one time, and then it will be ready and created for you, and then you could call that function at any point within the current program that you're writing or future programs. And there are many functions already created available online by other people. The built-in function on number 2, those are the ones that comes with the Python program when you install Python into your system. And these are a couple of them, as I mentioned, the input function, whereas you have the user apply certain content in order to massage that and spit something back out. Or, as I mentioned before, the data type function. Lambda expressions, anonymous Python functions, we'll go over that just a little briefly, and recursion functions. And recursion functions are kind of like a loop, and we'll go over that briefly as well. But primarily what we're centralized on for this course is the first 2. All right, so user-defined function, exactly what is this? So to create a function in Python, the keyword is def for define. So let's go ahead and let me open up a Python IDL, and then we'll show you a little bit what we're talking about as we walk through this. All right, so if I put in def, it's a define. So I'm defining a function. Now, typically what you'll see is my underscore and then something that's named toward that function to help identify it. So as an example that I put into the book, my function is the function that is created, and then what is this function going to do? Underneath it, you're going to put in like the conditions. What exactly is this point? So let's try this one out first in real time and see what it looks like. So if I put in my function, you have to have open and closing parentheses for this to be fully a function, and it has to be defined. We'll go ahead and put in the double bullets here, and then when we hit enter, it will automatically shift over as Python does. And for this quick example, we're just going to say hello. This is a function. And then I'm going to hit enter again. It's going to see if there is any additional conditions or anything that this function should do. If I hit once more, then it'll go to the next line. And at this point, this is in. Now, I've defined my function. I have provided what I want that function to do. So the next step is, let's call that function. And in order to call it, you're simply going to type that function with the parentheses and hit enter, and what this will do is essentially it will be calling that function, and then it will do whatever you apply to that function. With this example, we're just printing a string out. Hello, this is a function. So here we see I called it and it puts this out. So that's our initial first example. And this is literally creating a function. And this is what I want you to do this week as the assignment. I want you to create a function. So if we look down here on the handbook, I kind of go into a little bit more details, exactly what we just kind of described. So I'll let you go ahead and do all that. Now we can expand this out. In the parentheses, we can apply variables to our function. And then we could utilize those variables in here as well. So here you see that as an example. I applied a variable and then I applied a value to each of those variables. So let's do one or two of these just to real time see what this looks like. So I'm going to define another function. This time I'm going to call it my name. And I'll put in that same variable of fname for first name. What do I want to do with this? Well, I want to print out that variable plus is not that nice. Now, as you see here, I defined a variable, I defined a function, applied a variable within my function, and then I could utilize this variable when I call it. So I'm going to hit enter twice, and now this is defined within Python, and here, as you noticed, I can apply the value for that variable. So I'm going to still call it. So I'm going to call my name. Then within here, I'm going to put in the value for that variable. Now Python sees that this is the function that I'm calling, and he already knows, hey, I'm expecting this variable. And that's key as well to keep in mind. You have to know what the function requires in order to utilize it efficiently. So here I'm just going to put in my name, and then I'm going to hit enter. And now you see that it took in that specific value for the variable and it spat out what it expected. A couple things I want to point out real quick. Again, you notice that we had to concatenate the variable with our string value. The other thing to point out is I'm expecting a string value in my variable, so I don't have to worry about any issues with the data type for this example. If you were to take in, as an example, somebody inputting a specific expected value in your variable and they put something that is not expected. As an example, let's say we're doing a math problem and they put in a string. You're going to have to, somewhere within your function, incorporate certain things in there in order for it not to bomb or you understand what I'm saying. Error out accordingly. You have to end up making this pretty tight if you're going to use it in public. Alright, so that's the example there. Now, here I just kind of again did it 3 times just to show that you're not limited to the number either. You can continue to use it over and over again, applying different values within that same variable. Now here's another example that I provided on a function. This time I have 2 variables, and this time I'm specifically using it for a math problem. Now this one shows that it is defining the function, 2 variables, and what am I going to do with those 2 variables if provided? Well, I want to add it, I want to minus it, divide it, and multiply it. And then here on my output, you can see that I specifically incorporated what it is, the sum, the subtraction, the multiplication. And this is what I was referring to as well. This is a numeric input for those variables that's required for us in order to use our mathematical operators, but then I'm converting it to a string type on the output so that it will not provide any errors when it produces. Here in an example on this, I use 5 and 5 as my 2 variables in order to get the output based upon those values. Alright, so moving down on a built-in function, there, like I said, many of the Pythons, you can look online, built-in functions that comes automatically. You don't have to necessarily add to. So again, string and a type, as I mentioned before, covering in week 3. And then the lambda expression we'll talk about briefly. So the lambda expression is about kind of like a higher mathematics, whereas lambda is a colon a plus 10, and print out the x. And notice here's my variable value for a, and then it will put that in and create it accordingly, and the output is 15. Now the recursion one is similar to a loop. An example of recursion would be putting a mirror in front of a TV and you just see multiple dimensions all the way through. If you are into the factorial numbers and mathematics, you know that the 3 exclamation is the same as the value of 1 times 2 times 3. And this is the formula for that same factorial that you can play with on your own. You would have if this value is equal to 1, return 1, else do the factorial. And then you would have your output. So again, similar to the 3 exclamation, this same problem provides the proper answer as a factorial. All right, and here's an input function which we've used before, whereas the individual will apply something in similar to these string variables on the functions that I just did, and then it'll be coming out. So for your practice this time, I want you to create a program for a function. It can be an input function or another one, and your exercise is to create that function for the output and then submit it accordingly.